All right, I think we are live. This is the Tales from the Road podcast series. I've been meaning to do these podcasts a little bit more regularly. The last few months, I've had quite the kind of struggle with schedule and lots of different reasons why it wasn't working out. So the hiatus was about a month, but now we are ready to go for edition number 3. We are calling this Why We Are Wrong About the Soviet Union. So I think I will just hop right into it. But before I get to it, just some news from Tales from the Road. I'm in my new apartment in Belgrade, Serbia. I just spent the last 15 days backpacking Uzbekistan, and then I was living in Kyrgyzstan before this. So I'm back to Europe. I'll be here for the summer, so be prepared for some content coming from this region. Definitely going to do Montenegro and Serbia and some other countries in the neighborhood. Maybe we'll even pop back to Albania because I know you guys really enjoyed the Albania series. That being said, I think we're going to hop right into it. This is something I've been very excited about making, and we're going to start doing these podcasts maybe like 1 or 2 times a week, depending on how I'm feeling. But we're going to do it around this time, so 8 p.m. This is like almost 8 p.m. Serbia time. It's going to be also, I guess midday in the United States, a little bit late if you're in Asia, but it is what it is. So why we are wrong about the Soviet Union. So I just came off spending about a month and a half in Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan. That's the former Soviet Union. And there's just a lot of takeaways from that. But I think when we're talking about the Soviet Union, I think we got to get our definitions straight. We've got to understand what we're talking about. What was the Soviet Union? So if we go back historically a little bit, we're talking about the Russian Empire, which was this really large, expansive empire that went all the way from Moscow to the regions of Central Asia, all the way over to Asia. The thing was massive. They even had Alaska. I mean, Alaska is like literally the biggest the biggest U.S. state. So I couldn't really imagine having so much land to govern. Anyways, the Russian Empire was super corrupt. Long story short, they had a system called serfdom, where basically the peasantry of Russia were kind of not allowed to, they were basically like indentured servants and very, very close to slaves. The people in Russia were not living very well. So towards the end of the 1800s, there was a big kind of intellectual revolution led by Vladimir Lenin and others. I read this amazing, or I listened to this amazing podcast called Revolutions. You guys should check it out. It's on Spotify. They go into super detail about it, but there was an intelligentsia revolution. People started talking about communism from Karl Marx, who was around in the mid 1800s. It was kind of a new theory about like, what if the people took back the power from the elite? In a way, it has like some nice parallels to what happened in the United States. It just unfolded in a completely different way. So Russia was getting more and more corrupt towards the end of the 1800s, to the point where the Russian elites even spoke French as their first language and Russian as kind of the peasant language. So there was this huge segregation in society that was just not great. And there's a lot of strife, a lot of people being very unhappy, and to violence. So that's a big oversimplification, obviously, of the Russian Revolution. But in 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution happened, Red October. The Bolsheviks were the big communist political party. They overthrew the government in St. Petersburg. They basically killed the royal family, and then boom, you got the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union was a communist state. They were really focused on creating a new society for the people, by the people. The idea was to create a kind of a tiered system where essentially the proletariat would be controlled by a vanguard meaning like a small ruling class, and then that would progress through capitalism to a point where the vanguard would then become part of the proletariat, and then the society, in a sense, would govern itself. There wouldn't necessarily be a leader. As we know from history, that didn't work out. A lot of the Soviet Union, this perspective that we really get in the United States, we talk about it basically post-1945, which is when and the Soviet Union actually changed a lot from what Lenin had intended to what Stalin kind of created. And then, of course, the Khrushchev years and the Gorbachev kind of détente after that. So the main point, I don't want to tell you the history of the Soviet Union. That's not my goal with this podcast. My goal with this podcast is to illustrate that when we talk about the Soviet Union, and especially with regards to what we learned in the United States, it's all negative. Almost all of it is focused in a negative way because the way that our countries came up in the 50s, especially post-World War II, we look at the Soviet Union as the enemy, the competitor, the country out there that was doing all of the opposite things that we were doing and trying to take over the world, just like the way that America was also doing the exact same thing, on the other side, on the flip side. So it's an interesting dichotomy because I've talked to Russians and I've talked to people who are pro-Soviet Union, anti-Soviet Union. There's many more younger Russians who are very, very anti-Soviet Union, but they're kind of taught it the other way around. So everything that America was doing was against the grain of what the Soviet Union was trying to do. Those damn Americans were trying to promulgate their greater democracy, but it was really not what they were saying, blah, 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 blah. So it's just an interesting thing because this kind of propagandization is about the Soviet Union is what we get in the United States. When you think Soviet Union, you think bad. When you think like the color red scare, the being afraid of the Soviets, we need to root out the communists, bad. And then the last point about the Soviets is they were, scary. When you hear Russian, scary. When you see Cyrillic, the Russian alphabet, scary. And the thing is, yeah, this is what we get in the US. And it seeps deep down in, and it's carried over to what we think about Russia and what we think about Eastern Europe, the Central Asian sphere, and East Asia in general, which makes sense. I mean, most people don't travel to Russia. Most people don't meet Russian people. So it's definitely not outside of the realm of possibility that people would feel this way. It's just not correct. So I can give you a nice example. So I traveled to Russia in 2018 for the first time, 2017 for the first time. I took a flight. I was going from Spain to Bangkok, Thailand for my first time in Asia. Very excited. And I ended up booking a ticket on Aeroflot, which is the Russian national carrier Russian national carrier. Basically, they send me an email. It's all in Russian. And then just part of me, because I'm American and because it is what it is, I'm feeling a little bit like not concerned, but it's like, oh, and the weird part about Aeroflot is even though it's a Russian company and Russia is certainly not communist today, they still have the hammer and sickle on their emblem. So, as an American, when you see the hammer and sickle, you think like that's the enemy, unless you're part of Antifa or something, or you're super leftist guy. Today, that might be good for you. I don't know. I'm not here to judge your lifestyle, but most Americans, you're kind of taught it's a negative thing. So anyways, I'm flying through Moscow. They basically changed my flight. So instead of a 2-hour layover in Moscow, I have literally like 24 hours. Horrible. The airport's not good. They don't have, this was old Sheremetyevo Airport, which is an old school. Well, they've updated it since then, but it was not a good thing. And, everything about what I felt from the propagandization of what I got in my childhood and through my history classes kind of happened. When I saw the Cyrillic, I was a little bit nervous. When I saw the Russian border guards with their very stern looks and their hats, I got a little bit nervous. And I don't know why. I've been all over the place before that, and there was no reason to be nervous. I mean, but it's just this kind of feeling you get, and the connection with Russia and being the bad guys, the mafia guys, the guys that are going to kill you in an alley, the guys with the accents. I get it. It's not a good thing. I'm telling you, it's not a good thing. So I think that's kind of where it started. But when I went to Russia my first time, it really shocked me because I was just confronted with all of these kind of opinions that I had for some reason without any actual data to support my opinions. And I like to think of myself as a political scientist. I studied political science, and any good political science worth of salt has to do the work, do the data, do the due diligence, So I had all of these inhibitions and biases, and, we talk about unconscious bias and it, whatever it is, but it wasn't informed. It was a bad opinion, and I will tell you why. So I lived in Russia for about a month and a half. I had a Russian girlfriend in the past, and I went there to live there. And I also spent a lot of time in the Baltic states, which were former USSR places. Going to Russia, it's like interesting because you have so much baggage as an American in your mind about what it's going to be like. And there are some things that are certainly true about what it's like, but there are certainly things that are existing that you're not really aware of. The takeaways that I had from my first time in Russia is that Moscow and St. Petersburg are serious cities. They're big. They have lots of block housing. They have lots of remnants of the socialist, communist systems that were happening there. But what you forget is like there was an empire before. So they have beautiful, strikingly beautiful architecture, and especially St. Petersburg. I mean, if you don't know the history of St. Petersburg, the city was built by Peter the Great, and he built it. He basically took all of these artisans and architects and artists from Europe, especially France and Italy, and he said, build me a city. I'll pay you, build me a city. And so when you go to St. Petersburg, it's like, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like Prague on steroids. It's like Munich on steroids. It's like Paris, but like big, royal, regal, super impressive. And Moscow has that same kind of Los Angeles vibe. You know, it's huge. They have really pretty buildings. I mean, Los Angeles doesn't have a lot of pretty buildings, but it's just got this very unique and interesting thing. It's very Russian. It has all the Soviet stuff, but it's also modern and new and big. And so when you think about this Soviet empire that was constructed, you know, it was so closed and so isolated and so foreign and cold. And when you go there and it's the summer and you see the beauty of St. Petersburg and the canals and the boat rides and the fortresses and the churches, and you go to Moscow and you see the busy streets and you see the new Moscow, which has massive skyscrapers, and you see the modernity that's there, like all of this stuff that you were kind of told doesn't particularly make sense. And then when you meet the Russian people, because I talk to Russians pretty much every day, all the time. It's like my main part of my job. And I've spent a lot of time with Russian people. And there's nothing to be afraid of. And a lot of the things that we're told about Russians, or this narratives, are kind of informed through movies and film and TV and weird history books. But the reality is that Russians are lovely people. They're open and welcoming and have hopes and dreams and speak a very interesting and beautiful language and are well-traveled and cool people. I mean, there's also the super stereotypical Russian people that exist that are really pro-Putin and really pro-Russia and anti-American, and they think that their country is great, and they fill in all those nationalist boxes, but they're also very typical Americans as well. So I think that's the most striking thing about being in Russia. And the cool part is when you travel outside of Russia to Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, to name a few, you can see how diverse and how intricate the Soviet Union really was. When we think about the Soviet Union, we're always picturing like with these glasses, you know, it's like Russians. But like Stalin wasn't even Russian. Stalin was from Georgia. He was a Caucasian. So we miss a lot of the little nuances that I think happened in the Soviet Union, the really interesting kind of mixes and melanges of historical peoples and places and religions and languages and all this stuff. And we conflated it with this Russian communism, which was propagated by Lenin, who was partly Asian, Stalin, who was Georgian, and you know, there's lots of diversity within the Soviet Union. So I think that's kind of I think I'll go to this point now. So first off is Russia is not the USSR. And the USSR had a very important place in history from 1917 to basically the end of the 80s when it collapsed. The USSR had many different republics, whether that was the Stan countries, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, whether it was the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, whether it was Belarus and Ukraine, the much more commonly known because they're so close to the Russian sphere, Moldova, a country most people have never heard of, the Caucasian region, so Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. And then when you get over towards Asia, there's all these interesting republics that you can find within the Soviet Union that have just kind of become part of Russia. There's a lot of autonomous federal republics within Russia, and it makes it an extremely diverse place. So I think the first thing I'll say is Russia itself is way more diverse than you think it is. There are Asian-looking people in Russia. There are Middle Eastern-looking people in Russia. There are people who are Buddhist. There are people who are Orthodox Christian. There are Catholics. There are Muslims. There are people that speak a various like deluge of languages, whether it's the Tatars, the Chechens, the Yakut in the east. There are people that strike you much more as Mongolian. There are people that strike you much more as European. There are people that strike you much more as closer family friends to the Turks. It's a strikingly diverse place. And I think that's the thing we completely miss about Russia, and the thing we completely miss about the USSR. So spending time in Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan the last month and a half, you're just hit in the head with so many things that challenge who you are, what you think about things. Like I'll give you an example, and I use this example in my What's Going On in Kyrgyzstan video. You guys should check that one out. So Kyrgyz people, nomadic horse people, horse tribes, they joined the Russian Republic like over 150 years ago. The Russians were taking a whole bunch of different lands, and they were kind of, it was them and the Chinese. Who was going to take what? Who knows? The British were also, trying to take a lot of stuff too. So it's just weird because the Kyrgyz didn't really build much. So when the Soviet Union was founded and they founded the Kyrgyz Soviet Socialist Republic, the Soviets built a city. They called it Frunze, named after a famous military leader that was born in I guess, Bishkek today, or Pishpek as it was called. It was barely a city. It was a trading post. And everything about that place is so Soviet, so Russian, yet so Turkic and interesting. So like, it's just weird to see Eastern Asian looking people or Mongolian looking people. Like they really look Asian. Like if you saw them on the street, you would just say, oh, those are like some Chinese guys. But they could be further from the Chinese sphere. They have nothing to do with China, which is cool. I met a lot of Kyrgyz people, and they said they just say they're from China because it's easier. But it would be like saying you're from the United States, but you're really from Brazil. Like there's not a lot of overlap, but it's easier so people know where it is, I guess is the best way I can describe that. So it's just weird when you see these very East Asian looking people like living a very Turkic lifestyle, meaning like they speak a very Turkic language. It's very close to Turkish. They have these fabrics and these beautiful patterns and things in their homes. And it's just kind of cool. It strikes me as something I would see in Ankara or Istanbul or Izmir or, Baghdad, seriously. And then you see the people talk, and then they're Russian aesthetically. So they speak, especially in Bishkek, all the younger people speak Russian. They also have a Russian style and aesthetic. So if you see girls, they dress like Russians. The Russians often do like long fingernails for girls. They look like that. The men also, are wearing the tracksuits, very, very Russian style because it was part of the Soviet Union. So the weird part is there was the May 9th celebration. May 9th was basically Victory Day for the Soviets against the Nazis. And May 9th is this big military holiday that's still celebrated all over the Soviet Union, regardless. I mean, all over the former Soviet Union. Regardless of if they even like Russia or not anymore. It's a day of national pride. So May 9th, they fly a lot of red. Not a lot of people. It depends on the country. Some countries put up the old Soviet flag, and they did it in Bishkek. Some countries like Ukraine probably wouldn't do that, but they still have a May 9th celebration, and probably Estonia too. It's how much do you want to make it a part of your culture or not? So the interesting part was you're walking around the city, and they have pictures of these old Red Army, the Soviet army that, fought against the Nazis, held Stalingrad, basically saved Europe along with the United States. And the weird part is you see these guys, they're in the military uniforms, and, nice, Kalashnikov, with the little Soviet hat and everything, but it's like an Asian guy. And it's just not what you picture, as American. And the thing is, there is no such thing as an American. It can be anybody. Like anybody can be American. But the thing is, that was kind of the same deal for the Soviet Union. But for whatever reason, when we picture the Soviet Union, we picture the really typical classic Moscow Russian. But you had the Soviet Union, guys from Moscow, St. Petersburg, going to the, like literally to the Central Asian steppe, the mountains, and grabbing these villagers and recruiting them into the army. And you had people as far as Kyrgyzstan fighting and dying in Europe to preserve the Soviet Union and to basically preserve the world from the fascist overtaking. It's so weird. I mean, it's really cool and it's commendable, and like those people deserve to be celebrated because they did a great thing, but it's just like not what you expect. So you see this big picture of this Asian guy who looks like he's, some straight out of China, and it's just like he wasn't fighting with the Chinese, like he was on the team of the Soviet Union. And that's the same thing as the Uzbeks, who are these trading people from Central Asia who have a very Turkic aesthetic. There's nothing particularly Russian about these people, like at all. Because they also built their own civilization. They had this connection with Persia. They had a empire, the Samarkand, the pearl of Uzbekistan, one of the biggest cities that you guys should definitely visit if you ever make your way out there. It's just phenomenal. So that's kind of the main point about that. But it's just highly diverse, and it's cool because each place has taken something from the Soviet Union and then made it their own. So whether it's the Stolovaya culture, which is kind of this, it's like a buffet, and they have the typical Russian food, your borscht, your shi, it's a soup, kotlet, which is just like a fried patty of meat with mashed potatoes. But then in Kyrgyzstan, they do it with, they have like their traditional food, and they stuck it in there too. So you can get dumplings, and you can get pelmeni, you can get plov, this rice dish. So it's kind of funny to see how like they adapted the Russian ideology to their own, culture, which I think is cool. And you see this all over the former Soviet Union. And it was just interesting to see the difference between Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, because Uzbekistan just is a very different thing. Like you go there, it doesn't feel like it would be in the same country. I think like maybe it's the difference between like Texas and Vermont. The cultures of Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan are very close, but also very far away. And the cultures in Texas and Vermont, very different histories, but they are also interestingly close, but also very far away. So diverse, that's number one. Number two was that the Soviet Union had great failures, but also great successes. And when we talk about the United States, the successes end with helping the United States in World War II, and then basically they go into being an antagonist, an enemy, a bad place. So there's a lot of people, I met a lot of Soviets. I'm not trying to say the Soviet Union was a good place. A lot of people think it was not a good place, but there's lots of successes. I mean, the Soviets were putting people on the moon. They were doing incredibly technologically advanced things, and they were actually all over the Soviet Union. They were setting up these secret cities where they were developing atomic bombs, where they were developing military technology, telecommunications technology, laser technology. I mean, like really advanced stuff. And the Soviet Union had some of the best scientists on the planet. It was a really important place for science, for the propagation of science and the further advancement of the industry, right? It wasn't just the United States. I mean, they were making computers in the Soviet Union. They were making things that were just as good, if not better and quicker than the Americans. And it was interesting to kind of see it. There's a really interesting place in the center of Siberia, and it was this city of academics. And the Soviet Union sent all of these scientists to go live out and basically build a city. And the city was responsible for a lot of the research and basically, creation of systems and scientific advancement for the Russians. It's crazy, which is cool. One thing I want to also add about the Soviet Union is that they, it wasn't just a gray place of suffering. Like they had comedians, they had film, they had artists, they had these things called Dom Kulturis, which were these central locations that were built to bring people together to show off what the students were doing. They had a society, and they were constructing it their own way. They certainly didn't go the freedom of speech route and the personal and individual liberties route, but they were trying to create a better society. Did it get there? No. Was that the plan? I think it was. Did they do things that were really beneficial for people, I think they did some things. I think they got like halfway there. And the thing is, like, the United States, you know, it's a process. You know, the Soviet Union only lasted about 80 years before it crumbled. And the United States is on year 200 and whatever. And so we have a longer run at this experiment. And the thing is, if the Soviet Union was a little bit more stable, maybe if they had a little bit more free market policy and gave people a little bit more freedoms and rights, maybe they'd still be around, and maybe it would be the biggest contender to modern day China and modern day the United States. Currently, Russia is kind of in shambles. It's an interesting state, but people are not doing as well as they probably should be, and people don't really expect much because they weren't told to really expect much. So it's a very interesting thing because the Soviet Union failed on some big things. If you want to see a big Soviet Union failure, please watch my Katakal Pakistan video. And there's it talks about the Aral Sea and how the Soviets just messed it up. There was one of the largest bodies of water in the world, and they irrigated and dammed up the rivers to use for cotton farming in Uzbekistan, which is a desert, and then they destroyed basically an entire ecosystem. So when you have the planned economy in that way, and there's not a lot of people that can really prevent you or maybe second guess you, things like that do happen. So there were certainly failures. And also another hilarious failure is there's a pit in Turkmenistan. I'm trying to remember the name. If anyone knows the name, you can comment below. It starts with a D. And basically it was an open natural gas pit, and they ended up lighting it on fire, and it's been burning ever since. So I think that's hilarious. So certainly some failures, but certainly some successes as well, especially within the sciences. So I think that's interesting. What I'll say about Russian culture and the people in general is that Russians are very artistic people. Russia has some of the world's greatest writers, whether it was Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, some great poets like Pushkin, and some really like just amazing artistic works. They also have amazing paintings and museums. And just because the Soviet Union exists didn't mean this went away. So you had really interesting people doing really interesting artistic things within the Soviet Union, maybe in a different way, maybe in this nouveau Soviet, nouveau communistic style. But yeah, some of the greatest works from Russian literature were done during the Soviet Union as well. So just because they were very military focused and world domination focused and sphere increasing focused, doesn't mean the people in the Soviet Union weren't creating and weren't being special and unique, just like they were during the Russian Empire and, of course, as they are today. I just think a lot of people skip over that. Most of the Russians I meet are like extremely artistic people. They know a ton about different painters and poets, and they've all read big books, and reading seems to be a really common thing for Russians. I know most Americans just don't read. I mean, we read, but we don't read like the Russians for sure, especially when it comes to the classics. The one thing I can say about the US that I've seen in comparison is that Russians tell me that when they go to school, there's no emphasis on critical thinking. There's no emphasis on sort of identitarian ideals, you know, like being your own person and trying to figure it out for yourself. A lot of the things that happen in Russia are very much rudimentary, as in, you know, you're basically learning to memorize, and you're learning to be a part of the society, which kind of goes back to the Soviet Union thing. You weren't supposed to be a person. You were supposed to be a number, or you're supposed to be a part of the society. You're supposed to be a comrade. Very different idea. So yeah, that's what I'll say about that. I really like the communal infrastructure that you find all over the post-Soviet Union. In Bishkek and in many Soviet cities, they have beautiful parks, beautiful places for people to be outside, and beautiful places for people to congregate, which I guess is a very communist idea. You know, you want people to be, well, you know, with each other in public, but it's just kind of cool to see it like real time, because the cities were built kind of like for the people as opposed to like for cars, where my one thing about the US is like the cities are not super functional for the people, because like they weren't built with the people in mind. They weren't built for, you know, like pedestrians like going from A to B. They're mostly built around the car, which is fine, but it leads to bad traffic and a lot of headaches. And people don't just like walk around so much in the US. They don't have these big walking streets. And it seems like every Soviet larger city that I've been to has, you know, a nice walking street, a place for the kids to play, like this very like open ideology. They want you to go out. They want you to be out with people. I think it's cool. It's a good thing. All right. So moving on to my last point, which is I think the Soviet Union prevented a lot of strife for the places that it controlled. So the Caucasus region, I don't know if you guys know a lot about it, but we're talking Georgia, Abkhazia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, kind of like that's where East Turkey and Iran kind of get involved. And then in the southern part of the Soviet Union is Chechnya, Dagestan, Ingushetia, Ossetia. So these are places with a lot of ethnic identity, a lot of ethnic tension, and they're very akin to here in the Balkans. So these people have lived next to each other for a long time. They don't all have the same religion. They all have different languages, and many of these people really dislike each other. And so what happened during the Soviet Union times is because there was a bigger force and there was kind of like that guiding hand of the inner circle, they basically prevented a lot of probable wars that would have happened between these people. So now, since the Soviet Union has pulled out, there's been a war between Georgia and between Russia. There was a big Chechnyan war against Russia in the 90s, right after the Soviet Union fell. There was most recently, there was an Armenia was launching rockets into Azerbaijan and vice versa. And since the Soviet Union was there, you could tell these smaller states to like knock it off, which, I would say it's a good thing. I'm all for people having the right to have a national identity and having the right to have their own country, but waging war over really, really small tidbits, I don't think is necessarily a good thing. So I think that was probably good. So they definitely quashed some turbulence, and once the Soviet Union went away, there was certainly a lot more turbulence. So my last note, and then I'll wrap it up because I want to keep these around 30 minutes, is that the Soviet Union is really hated and really loved. It really depends on the person you're talking to. I just think it really depends on your experience. And I think any period of time has really bad parts and really good parts. And the truth is probably somewhere right in the middle. So that's an American's opinion on the Soviet Union. I hope you guys got something out of it. I actually love traveling in the former Soviet Union. Everyone's super nice. Everything's super interesting. It's totally different, but very similar to what you would think it would be. And the diversity is what makes it so cool because, they just got so much stuff going on. And I think Moscow is the center of that. But if you get out a little bit, you go to Tatarstan or you go to Dagestan or you go to Uzbekistan, these are really different places. And they're worth a shout out. So I will shout out the former Soviet Union. I will continue to go back. I would love to go to every former Soviet Union country. It's really interesting. And my favorite part is the mosaics. If you guys have ever seen Bald and Bankrupt, he does these mosaic tours, and they really do exist. It's cool to see it like in real time. And that's it. That's what I have to say about that. So if you liked the cast, we're going to end it here. I have a new video about Karakalpakstan. I have a new video about what it's like in Uzbekistan, so you guys can check that out for sure. We got 4 more videos coming from Uzbekistan, and then I will start my series here on Serbia. If you guys have any interest in telling me what kind of podcast you'd like to hear, if you think this is a good venue, definitely comment. I don't know if anyone's in the chat. I don't know what's going on with the chat. Oh, here we go. All right, so let's look at the chat because I'm here. So there's Food Expert. What's up, dude? Hope you're well. Yes, I'm in Serbia. I'm in Belgrade. I'm not sure you're still on the feed, but yes, I am. Carl Soft Community says Albania and Soviet Union. Fair enough. All right. Tim says, I'm from Uzbekistan. Even though I didn't grow up in the Soviet Union, I noted it destroyed our culture. Great video about Uzbekistan, but I really liked it. No offense, but Russians don't see Uzbeks and Tajiks as human. Well, that's a very fair opinion to have, and I can totally understand where you're coming from. It's a really complex issue, and I'm sure lots of Russians do, but I'm sure lots of Russians don't, because there's good people and there's bad people in this world. Alex says, have you been to Ukraine? I have been to Ukraine. I've been to Lviv. I was there like 3 years ago, and I actually plan on moving to Kiev after Serbia. So stay tuned for some Ukraine-related stuff. And the last one is from Aurelio, and then we'll get out of here. It says, on my experience, Russians don't do small talk. You often find yourself after a while engaged in existential and serious conversations with them. Yes, that's totally true. Russians are super deep people and they hate small talk. So if you ever want to talk to some people like, you know, late night, they have some really interesting things to say because they're well read. And when you say hello to a Russian person, hey, how are you? They just go, good. There's not really there's not much to say. Some people find Russians cold. I guess Russians can be kind of cold sometimes. It depends on the people you meet. There's warm people, there's cold people. On average, Russians are certainly more cold than Italians, who are certainly more warm than cold. But it just totally depends on the person you meet. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream. We're going to end it here. Stay tuned for more. And das svidaniya. I enjoyed my Russian times, and we'll see you. Thanks for watching, guys.